It's late. The world is quiet but not empty. I'm here with you, and this is the Dark Files. Tonight, we walk together through 5 real crime stories found on Reddit, stories that stick to the ribs, stories that leave a mark. Let's see what we find in the shadows between words. The road beyond the pasture. In a quiet Kentucky field, a pony slipped the fence. What followed was a chain of silent gestures, ruined metal, and cold demands echoing down the line. The morning began with dew on the grass and a hush that clung to everything. A worn fence divided pasture from road, each post gray and leaning. Sun crept over the hills, catching in the mane of a small pony grazing alone beyond where he should have been. The world was still, except for this slow movement, the animal's head dipping to clover on the wrong side of the wire. A car passed along the 2-lane road, tires whispering over old asphalt. The driver did not see the pony. But another man, a stranger, slowing behind his own wheel, pulled to the side and stepped out. He was older, careful in his movements, boots crunching on gravel as he crossed toward the animal. His shadow stretched over wet grass. He walked up to the house just beyond a line of trees and knocked on the door, his fist dull against wood in the early light. Inside, someone listened quiet first, then hurried and followed him back out across the yard. The air was clean and cool as they moved together toward the field. The stranger explained in plain words, "There's a horse loose." He pointed across the ditch where hooves had pressed a path into soft earth. They saw the animal standing in the open, head bowed to graze. There was no sense of urgency yet, only the practical business of bringing something home. The stranger took cautious steps into the field. The pony lifted its head, ears flicking at a distant sound, a car approaching around a bend hidden by trees. The stranger called softly to it, hands held low and empty. He moved closer by degrees, never too fast. Then came a moment when he gauged distance with practiced eyes and decided to act. He guided the pony toward the edge of the road, the sun behind them now, throwing long shadows onto pavement, and glanced up as headlights cut through mist. He raised his arms high and wide, palms out for visibility. He flashed his phone's light twice into oncoming glare and waved both hands at shoulder height. Somewhere inside metal and glass, another driver fixed their gaze straight ahead. No brake lights flared red against gray morning. No engine note changed or slowed. Time split around what happened next, hooves striking pavement in sudden panic, a shout that no one could hear above engine noise, then impact. Sound rushed out of space all at once, a hollow thud followed by silence cold enough to sting your teeth. The car shuddered as it hit flesh and bone at speed. Metal bent inward, glass cracked along invisible lines. The pony fell still where it landed, dust settling in a slow drift around legs folded under its body. The driver pulled over 50 yards down, hazard lights clicking in sharp bursts through thickening air. The stranger stood unmoving by the roadside, hands limp at his sides, watching as another figure stepped from behind a wheel. There were no sirens yet, only silence rolling out between them all. Later that day, police arrived. Clipboard under one arm, pen poised but unused for long stretches as statements were taken beside 2 cooling engines. The road warmed underfoot. Flies gathered where fur met asphalt. Voices dropped low so as not to disturb anything more than necessary. A tow truck came for the car but left again when its owner insisted it could still be driven home, hood dented deep, but tires unbroken. Someone else brought tarps for what was left on the shoulder. By afternoon, word had spread through town. There had been an accident up near Miller's pasture. Someone's animal got loose. Someone's car would never look quite right again. At dusk, when fields darkened before nightfall, a telephone rang inside a kitchen 2 miles away from where it started. The voice on the other end was clipped and unfamiliar. Frustration bled through every syllable. "You owe me $5,000. There was no greeting, no pause for acknowledgement, just numbers set down like stone between them. A kitchen table stood between receiver and wall, a mug half full of cold coffee nearby, crusted sugar at its rim. Outside, insects buzzed against glass in growing dark. "I don't know what your car is worth," came the reply after a moment's hesitation, words measured carefully against what they'd just heard. "Go through your insurance company," they said again and again, a phrase repeated until it lost most of its meaning under pressure. But silence did not win out here. Instead came threat after threat, legal terms wielded like weapons. "If you don't pay now, I'll sue for more." Still, "Go through your insurance." The caller insisted their insurance had refused them, that they were told to file directly against whoever let that animal wander free, that this debt must be settled without delay or mediation or paperwork. Each time, resistance met insistence, voices rising only once before falling back to monotone repetition. "Let your insurance call mine. File your claim first. I can't help you unless you do." Night deepened outside, windows streaked with dust and condensation. Somewhere further off, dogs barked over fences unseen in darkness. After hanging up, there was no relief, only silence thickening around empty chairs. An unread mail stacked high beside an old radio, playing too quietly to fill any room completely. By morning, news had faded again from local minds. Roads dried beneath another sun. Nothing marked where accident gave way to aftermath except fresh scars in bark along ditch-side sycamores and tire tracks pressed deep enough to last until next season's rain. But calls kept coming, each one shorter than last but harder somehow. "Insurance says I'm not at fault. My company won't cover it unless you pay first. Why won't you make this right?" Somewhere between these lines, suspicion grew. Perhaps there was no insurance policy waiting quietly behind those threats. Perhaps nothing but desperation or pride or anger kept this conversation alive day after day, despite every attempt to let it die away naturally. And so days passed, with mailbox watched from kitchen window for letters stamped official or marked urgent, with each ring of phone bringing new tension into rooms already heavy with loss. The absence of hoofbeats still echoing beyond fence line every evening when wind shifted just so through tall grass left unmowed, since accident claimed what used to graze there unhurriedly each dawn. Legal terms filtered slowly into everyday speech. Liability hung in air like dust motes caught in late afternoon sunbeams slanting across tile floors. Settlement became code for threat unfulfilled. Claim meant trouble not yet resolved, but always looming just beyond next sunrise, or knock at door, or letter slid beneath splintered sill by unseen hand passing by before breakfast was finished, or coffee cooled past drinkable temperature once again. There were no police visits after first day, no sirens or flashing lights marking passage of time since initial crash, but memory lingered anyway. Shape of dented fender glimpsed in rearview mirror during trip into town. Weight of calls unanswered stacking higher than bills paid on time month after month despite uncertainty. Gnawing quietly beneath surface calm, maintained outwardly for sake of family or neighbors, who asked only once before changing subject altogether, whenever topic threatened comfort or routine too much for casual conversation among friends accustomed to quieter forms of tragedy than this one offered up so suddenly one ordinary morning, near start of summer heatwave stretching horizon flat and featureless, as far as anyone cared look anymore, without reason strong enough justify journey from porch swing to roadside ditch even briefly, while sun still shone overhead unbroken by cloud or memory alike most days, since then gone by without incident worth remembering at all, except this one which would not fade no matter how many times retold inside mind or outside among those few willing. Listen closely enough, catch details missed first time round when shock dulled edges sharper than truth itself ever managed. Become given chance grow wild, unchecked behind closed doors late at night, when restlessness took hold stronger than sleep ever could hope, resist indefinitely regardless effort, spent denying inevitable arrival, new day shaped much like last, only emptier somehow now than ever before. That story leaves a strange ache behind. It's unsettling how quickly life can turn, a thin line between feeling safe and realizing you never were. Some things never really let go. Dusk in Anchorage, the collision at the school lot. A cold evening settles in Alaska as two cyclists cross paths with a child on a dirt bike, and the silence that follows leaves more than wreckage behind. The air was cooling fast over Anchorage. It was late summer, but dusk had already begun to press down, blue and heavy, on the empty lot behind the school. Concrete stretched out, patchy with old stains and loose gravel. The sun's last angle filtered through birch trees, casting long shadows across the painted lines. Two bicycles moved steady along the edge, a man and his girlfriend. Their wheels spun in rhythm, rubber hissing softly against the pavement. Their breath hung faintly in the cooling air. The man checked his speed on his phone, 8 miles per hour, recorded by Strava, a number without meaning until later. There were no other voices, no cars idling nearby, only the slight slap of tires and the distant call of a magpie, sharp as broken glass. A corner loomed ahead, half lit by a flickering lamp. They steered into it slowly. The school building stood silent on their left, windows dark, doors chained shut for summer. Then from behind the wall came a new sound, a high-pitched whine cutting through dusk's hush. A small motorcycle burst from around the corner. Red and white paint flashed in the dimness, a CRF-50, one of those children's dirt bikes meant for backyards or empty fields. Its engine stuttered once, then rose to a keening yell as it accelerated into the lot. The rider was slight, no more than 7 years old. His helmet was too big, chin strapped loose beneath his jaw. He hunched forward over the handlebars, legs barely reaching the pegs. For an instant he seemed to hesitate at the sight of two cyclists ahead, frozen against concrete and shadow. Then there was no time for anything else. The bike cut left abruptly, too fast for the boy's hands to manage, and crashed into the side of the man's bicycle. A jolt went through metal and bone. Spokes snapped like brittle twigs beneath sudden weight. The collision sent both vehicles spinning, the man thrown sideways off his saddle, palms scraping across rough concrete, breath knocked loose from his chest. The child's dirt bike kept going. Out of control now, it plowed through him and struck his girlfriend 8 feet away. Her bicycle crumpled under impact. She tumbled to one side with a muffled gasp. The engine stuttered again before finally dying out in a pool of oil and dust. Silence returned, quickly broken only by shallow breathing and the ticking of cooling metal. The boy sat stunned on the ground beside his toppled machine. Blood from a skinned knee pooled quietly on torn jeans. He looked up at strangers with wide eyes, frightened but uncrying, lips pressed together hard enough to blanch them white. The man stood slowly, pain blooming along his hip and shoulder where he'd landed hardest. He looked down at his bicycle. Bent frame split at a seam near the rear axle, front wheel warped beyond repair, brake cables hanging limp like dead veins. His girlfriend sat up next to her own bike, her hand trembling slightly as she checked for broken bones beneath her jacket sleeve. The boy did not move at first. He seemed smaller now in dusk's fading light, helmet askew, hands clutching handlebars as if they alone might anchor him to this world. The man crouched beside him and asked where he lived. The boy shook his head blankly, not knowing an address or even a phone number for his parents. His voice came out thin and flat. "I don't know." They waited there for a moment longer, surrounded by silence and shattered pieces of carbon fiber scattered across pavement like pale bones. Eventually, they gathered themselves and began walking west with the child in tow, pushing their ruined bicycles alongside them through long grass at the edge of the lot. Gravel crunched beneath each step. Dusk thickened overhead until electric lamps blinked on across empty playgrounds. The walk stretched nearly a mile and a half through quiet neighborhoods where porch lights flickered behind drawn blinds. Cars sat unmoving in driveways. Curtains twitched as strangers passed by with awkward cargo and a silent passenger between them. When they reached the house, a single-story home set back from an uneven curb, they knocked twice before anyone answered. A woman opened the door. She stared at her son first. Helmet crooked, jeans torn open at both knees, face streaked with dust but dry-eyed still. Then she looked past him to see two adults holding broken bikes between them under porchlight haze. No words passed for several seconds. Inside smelled faintly of frying oil and detergent, the humdrum scent of dinner half finished before disaster interrupted routine. The woman listened as they explained what happened, how her son had come barreling out of an empty schoolyard at dusk without warning or supervision, how both bicycles had been destroyed, how lucky everyone was that injuries were minor this time. She nodded slowly but said little else at first, just gathered her son inside and closed the door partway against chill air seeping in from outside. Over days that followed, communication fell into text messages, a sequence of clipped exchanges marked by promises made and deadlines missed. The man sent photos of his ruined bicycle, frame twisted beyond recognition, chains snapped and trailing across torn rubber tires, reflectors shattered into bright slivers scattered in bottom-of-the-box shadows. He kept records, the original receipt still crisp from 9 weeks earlier when he'd bought it new during a summer sale before tariffs drove prices skyward across Alaska's few shops. He compared what he'd paid then, just over $2,000, to current listings clocking closer to $5,000 as inventory thinned out under new costs. He told them plainly, "Find me one just like it, in size and condition, and I'll accept it instead of cash. Or reimburse what I paid if you can't manage that much." Each message came back slower than before, apologies couched in delays, offers trimmed down to bare minimums, appeals to fairness that never quite addressed what had been lost in asphalt scrape and engine noise under failing light that night behind the school. He watched days slip by without progress. Each week brought another excuse: funds delayed, confusion about model numbers, uncertainty about what counted as like new, when everything felt less certain with time passing farther from dusk's sharp edge. He remembered walking home that night after leaving their address, a mile and a half retraced on foot with nothing left but silence between footsteps and sore muscles, where bruises had already begun to bloom under skin cooled by northern wind. Still he waited for restitution or replacement or even simple acknowledgement that something precious could be lost so suddenly under fluorescent lamps flickering above an empty school parking lot after hours. When police were called, they did not come. Not then nor later when follow-up mattered most. An officer took information over the phone instead. Names exchanged. Details given about what happened that night when responsibility went missing alongside daylight at Anchorage's edge. A report was filed for information only. A line item among many incidents filed away in digital silence, where nothing more would be done unless someone insisted harder or longer than exhaustion allowed. Later he learned that even contacting both parents proved difficult, the father unreachable at numbers that rang silent or disconnected entirely. By midnight's approach, after collision gave way to disappointment, instead of justice or closure or anything clean enough to put away for good beneath memory's surface tension. He read back through old messages again, searching for assurance somewhere between, "We'll make this right," and "Can we try something less?" He thought about how easily things break. the delicate geometry of welded tubes designed to carry weight without warning, until one moment shatters everything built up over quiet evenings spent riding safe streets with someone trusted beside you under northern sky turning blue-black overhead, while magpies watch from their branches above it all. Now every ride felt different, a new wariness creeping in where confidence used to live unchallenged by what could come screaming out from behind corners, unlit by anything but memory's pale glow on concrete still stained from last month's crash. Restitution became not just about money, but about restoring some balance unsettled since dusk settled heavily over Anchorage that night. The kind of debt measured not only in dollars, but also in trust lost among strangers forced together by accident and consequence too large for words exchanged through glass screens late at night, when sleep refused to come easily anymore. The negotiation dragged on, each conversation shorter than before, until silence settled again over both homes separated now not just by distance, but also by everything unsaid between people who never meant to meet, except for chance colliding with speed at just the wrong moment beneath streetlights flickering out one by one as autumn crept closer across Alaska's horizon. It's hard not to feel small after hearing that. People carry heavy secrets. Sometimes they spill out in ways you'd never expect. The world feels a little less certain now. The name he would not keep. In a quiet Oregon town, a boy stares at the name on his school papers and wonders if it will ever belong to him. A boy sits at the kitchen table. His pencil is still. The paper in front of him is blank except for his name, pressed out in careful block letters across the top. He looks at it for a long time, silent. Outside, rain touches the glass with small, steady taps that do not stop. The house is old. Light comes in through one window, pale and thin. The walls are lined with photographs. Some are turned face down. In the hallway, there is a coat that hasn't been worn in months. His mother stands at the counter, hands around a mug that has gone cold. She does not speak. She watches him, waiting for something he cannot say out loud. He asks her if it's possible to have a different last name. His voice is quiet, as if he's not sure she will hear him over the rain. She does not answer right away. She sets down her mug and sits across from him. She asks why. He just shakes his head, looks back at the name on the paper. The silence grows between them, filling the old kitchen like fog. Later, she searches through drawers for old documents, birth certificates, school forms, bills with names printed across them in faded ink. She looks at each one before putting them back again. The boy goes to bed early that night. In his room, shadows move across the ceiling as headlights sweep past outside. He lies awake and listens to the distant murmur of voices downstairs. His mother on the phone, her words muffled but tense. In the morning, there is no breakfast on the table. The air in the house feels heavier than usual. The boy dresses himself and ties his shoes slowly, counting each loop. At school, he writes his name on every worksheet and test, first name, then last name. Each time he pauses before finishing it. The teachers call him by both names during roll call. Some say it louder than others. He watches other children walk home with their fathers after school. Their voices carry in the wet air as they laugh and talk about nothing important. His father used to come sometimes. Now he does not come at all. Evenings pass quietly in the house. The television glows blue against the far wall, but no one is watching it. The boy sits with his knees pulled up to his chest, staring at nothing in particular. His mother writes notes on scrap paper late into the night, names and dates and questions without answers. One afternoon, she takes him to an office building downtown. The halls smell faintly of cleaning supplies and something older beneath it, a scent that lingers long after people leave. They sit together in hard plastic chairs while someone calls out names behind a glass window. When their turn comes, They step forward together. His mother speaks quietly through the slot in the glass, asking about papers and forms, and what can be done when someone wants to change a name that isn't theirs anymore. The clerk behind the window listens without looking up from her screen. Her voice is flat as she explains procedures, requirements, a signature here, a consent there. She says both parents must agree unless there are reasons written into law or history or something heavier than either of them can lift alone. Outside again, rain has started falling harder than before. They walk home beneath one umbrella held between them, each step slow across slick sidewalks littered with last year's leaves. That night his mother reads through legal forms online, the language dense and impersonal, full of conditions and exceptions. She prints out 2 pages and leaves them on the table beside his homework folder. The boy looks at them but does not touch them. Days pass like this, mornings filled with silence, afternoons shadowed by waiting, evenings spent listening for footsteps that never come up the walk anymore. At school, another boy asks about his last name, where it came from, and why it sounds different from his mother's. He shrugs without answering and slips away down the hall before anyone can press further. He begins writing only his first name on tests when he thinks no one will notice. Teachers send home notes about missing information, but he never mentions them aloud. On weekends, he helps his mother fold laundry in silence. Socks paired by color, shirts stacked by size, names written inside collars fading with each wash until they almost disappear entirely. Sometimes there is mail addressed to both of them, letters from agencies or old friends who do not know how things have changed inside this house since last winter ended and spring refused to begin again. When his birthday comes around, there are no parties or presents from anyone but his mother. She bakes a cake with too much frosting and sings happy birthday softly under her breath, while he blows out candles one by one instead of all at once. That evening, he tells her again that he wants a new last name, one that feels like it belongs to both of them or maybe to no one at all. She nods, but does not promise anything new this time. Instead, she gathers up his old homework sheets from where they've piled near the door, each one marked with a name he has already begun to refuse silently inside himself. Winter returns early that year. Frost creeps along window panes before dawn. Nights stretch longer than either of them remembers from before. Sometimes they sit together in darkness as power flickers during storms, candles glowing on tabletops, while wind rattles loose panes of glass along the back porch door. Through everything, the rain and silence and waiting, the boy keeps writing only half of his name whenever he can get away with it. First name only, last initial trailing off behind it like an afterthought left unfinished for someone else to complete someday far away from here. One afternoon, there is another meeting downtown, a short walk through slush-filled streets to an office where everyone speaks too quickly for comfort or understanding. This time, his mother brings along a stack of forms filled out as best as she can manage without answers from anyone else involved in their lives anymore. The clerk recognizes them now, but offers nothing new. Procedures remain unchanged. Requirements stay fixed as though written into stone long before either of them ever stepped foot inside this town or learned how difficult a simple thing like changing a name could become when history refuses to let go quietly into night. Outside again, snow falls instead of rain, soft flakes settling over everything, until even footprints vanish behind them within minutes of passing by. Back home, they warm soup on the stove while silence settles over everything once more, a quiet deeper than any storm outside could ever bring with it, no matter how long winter lasts this time around. There's an emptiness in the aftermath. You wonder what people are capable of when nobody's watching, how easily trust can break and vanish into silence. Suppressed paths, the quiet tangle of old easements. An old house sits still at the end of a Massachusetts street. Its windows reflect the gray light, but out back, the ground remembers a path no one walks anymore. A thin wind moves down the side street, nudging maple leaves across uneven stones. There are two houses here. One stands taller, a multi-family building with faded clapboard siding. The other is smaller, set back, watching over a lawn left wild at the corners. Both houses stand on land tied together by decisions made before most living neighbors were born. 75 years ago, there was only one lot. It bordered the water, and in summer the trees would crowd thick along the edge. On certain mornings then, sunlight touched the boards of an old wooden pier, and men dragged boats down to tie them where the tide met barnacled posts. The owner was a friend of the family. He worked with his hands and trusted his own words more than any lawyers. When he split his property into two, he wrote his terms himself. A right-of-way for each lot, one to allow crossing over to reach the new house behind, and one in return so that those in the front house could haul their boats down to the water. He called them easements, a handshake written in ink. The deeds were filed. The arrangement seemed simple enough. Years passed, families moved in and out. The front lot grew quieter as time went on. One winter storm took out half the pier. Another year, the rest gave way, swept off by ice and currents stronger than memory. By then, coastal law had changed. The tides were not welcome to new piers or old ones rebuilt. The right-of-way on paper still led from the multi-family house to where boats once waited, but now it ended at a patch of weeds and sand littered with broken shells. Decades passed this way. The lot stayed within one family, a father's name on both deeds, then a mother's, then another generation altogether. The houses watched each other across a yard marked by nothing but grass pressed flat by rain. Inside the taller house, upstairs rooms gather shadows early in winter. Dust rests on thick window sills and settles inside door frames painted too many times. Inherited silence moves from floorboard to floorboard. The land outside carries its own kind of tension. A path exists only in old paperwork and recollection. No tire marks cut through grass. No footprints pressed down toward water that can't be reached anymore. On some afternoons, there is a quiet ache, a sense that something waits unresolved between these walls and boundaries drawn long ago. The current owner sorts through yellow deeds spread across a kitchen table grown soft at the edges from years of use. Two documents side by side. Each describes a right-of-way carved through space that has not known footsteps for half a century. Lawyers have been called. Their voices come over phone lines like distant thunder, one steady, cautious, one brisk, almost dismissive. The first lawyer speaks slowly about public notice, research stretching back through dusty records where names are faded and signatures curl like dried leaves. Every party who might ever have had a claim must be accounted for, even if they are long gone or never existed beyond one man's intent. He describes title searches, layers peeled back, until nothing remains hidden in city archives or courthouse drawers swollen with age. He says some easements become ghosts that linger. Their removal is never simple when history is written in legal language meant to outlast stone itself. The second lawyer tells another story. If both lots belong to one hand now, what difference does it make? Strike out what no longer matters. Clean up old promises that lead nowhere. If there are no strangers waiting in dark corners of forgotten law, no secret rights hiding in footnotes, the path can simply be erased with new ink. Outside, evening falls quietly over both houses. Streetlights blink awake behind bare branches. Inside, lamps burn low above faded counters. There is no rush, only questions that settle heavier as night grows deep around empty fields where piers once stood. No one walks between these buildings after sunset anymore. No voices call across yards grown thick with clover and early shadows. Sometimes neighbors drive past without slowing down. They see two houses standing close but never crossing paths now except on paper locked away in city files or fireproof boxes under stairs. Morning comes gray again, rain tapping against panes streaked with salt from distant storms off the coast. In rooms lined with boxed-up photographs and letters too brittle to unfold, someone reads old deeds aloud under their breath. The words sound strange now, without meaning tied to movement or purpose. Right of way over Lot B for benefit of Lot A. Right of way over Lot A for benefit of Lot B. Nothing moves outside except fallen branches flicked aside by wind grown restless before dawn. In legal offices far from this street, clerks sort through microfiche records searching for any sign that someone else might care about these lines drawn so long ago. A descendant's name misspelled on a form, an address crossed out after marriage or war or accident turned history aside. But silence holds steady here. The only witnesses are old shutters creaking against their frames and steps worn smooth by years spent waiting for change that never comes. Every so often a car pulls up outside. Doors open and close softly as people carry groceries and sometimes glancing at boundaries. Only they remember from childhood summers spent chasing fireflies along fences that no longer stand. Inside again, papers stacked neat as dominoes waiting for a push one way or another. A process begun but not finished, yet because certainty slips away when memory fades and law grows thick around simple things left undone too long. No court dates are set. No neighbors gather to argue fate or fairness under porch lights buzzing with moths. Only time moves forward, slowly grinding away at stories told in passing about paths taken when there was still somewhere left to go. Upstairs at night, someone listens to rain on roof tiles, while downstairs kitchen clocks tick steady, as heartbeats marking hours spent wondering how much matters when nothing changes, but names on deeds filed deep beneath city stone. There is no answer waiting here, only pages growing thin, where fingers turn them over looking for certainty among words written by hands already gone cold decades before anyone living dared question why they mattered at all. I keep thinking about loneliness, how it can twist things up inside us or make the dark seem closer than it is. Not all wounds are visible. Toe notices. In a quiet Florida apartment complex, the hum of a truck engine cuts through uneasy silence. Above, a neighbor watches from behind glass. Below, paperwork collects like dust. Some things are decided with words, others with warnings left under windshield wipers. The hallway is silent before sunrise, but the light in the living room is already on. Outside, the world is dark and damp, air heavy with salt. A man stands by his window, watching the parking lot below. The headlights of a lone Silverado catch the orange glow of a street lamp. The truck's paint is dull, streaked with a week's worth of rain. On the dashboard, two folded slips of paper wait. He moves slowly through the living room, trailing the scent of brewed coffee and laundry soap. The apartment is new to him, boxes half unpacked, art leaning against walls, faint stains where water once ran from the master bath. The tile floor is cool beneath his bare feet. His phone glows on the counter, no new messages. He sets it down next to an envelope marked with yesterday's date. Upstairs, faint footsteps move across the ceiling, measured, deliberate, then stop. He pulls on a shirt and steps outside into thick morning air. The grass is slick with dew. Somewhere in the distance, sprinklers hiss. As he passes under his neighbor's balcony, he glances up but sees nothing behind drawn curtains. At his truck, he peels back one slip of paper and then another. Both are bright yellow, stiff with condensation. Each bears the same message in block letters. Vehicle will be towed by November 12th for violation of HOA rules. There are no other notices on any nearby cars. Two white vans sit side by side further down the lot, ladders strapped to their roofs, windows painted over from inside. He checks each windshield, nothing taped there but dust and pollen. He slides into his truck and closes the door quietly behind him. For a moment he sits still, hands resting on the steering wheel. Out the windshield stretches a row of empty parking spaces, and beyond them a low wall of palm trees trembling in wind. By 9 o'clock, he's dialing the number for the property manager's office. A woman answers after 3 rings, her voice bright and practiced but distant. She listens as he explains about the tow notices, about his truck, a 2006 Silverado 2500, privately registered and insured, used for nothing but groceries and moving boxes. He mentions the small orange light atop the cab, a remnant from its past life before he bought it second-hand at auction. No logos or stencils mark its sides, no tools rattle in its bed. She hesitates, then says she'll speak to the HOA president, the man upstairs, about it. Her tone is clipped but not unfriendly. He hangs up and sends an email repeating everything they discussed: make and model of his truck, registration documents attached, a photograph taken beneath that street lamp just before dawn. Outside, clouds begin to gather along the horizon, thickening fast enough that sunlight fades from gray to slate blue in minutes. Afternoon comes slow and heavy inside those walls. He runs water in the kitchen sink until steam curls up around his wrists. The pipes groan softly, an echo from above. He checks his email again. No reply yet from the property manager. The day passes in fits. A slice of bread toasted then forgot. Keys set down on a stack of unopened mail. Footsteps echoing overhead every few hours. That night, as he lies in bed listening to thunder roll across flat streets outside town, he thinks of water leaking through drywall, pooling beneath tile seams, how quietly damage spreads when no one is watching. By morning, 2 more tow notices have appeared beneath his windshield wiper, fresh ink bleeding into damp paper fibers. This time he calls again, first to the property manager, then to her voicemail when she doesn't answer. He leaves his name twice, spells out his license plate, repeats that it's not a commercial vehicle by law or use or intent. Just after noon, she calls back. Her voice is thinner now, strained at the edges, as if stretched between conversations she'd rather not have. She says it doesn't matter how it's registered or insured because it looks commercial, the word hanging between them like a verdict issued without evidence or appeal. He asks why 2 work vans nearby haven't been cited for anything at all. There's silence on her end, a pause so long he thinks maybe she's hung up. But then she says nothing can be done unless directed by the president. Upstairs, someone drags furniture across tile floor, a chair leg scraping hard against stone. In this building, sound travels too easily and lingers too long. He begins documenting everything, photographs of each notice, emails sent and received, images of those untouched work vans lined up beside his Silverado under swaying palms. The days blur together in repetition. Wake early. Check for new warnings stuck beneath glass. Watch as neighbors come and go without pause or concern. A stray cat appears each afternoon at dusk, a thin gray shape weaving between bumpers before vanishing beneath hedges trimmed too close to dirt by landscapers who never linger longer than they must. Inside, his apartment boxes remain unpacked, the contents growing heavier by degree each day they stay sealed shut. He finds himself moving more quietly now, footsteps measured, doors closed softly so as not to carry sound upward through floors thin as paper. On Friday evening, rain hits hard against sliding glass doors leading onto his narrow balcony, a steady rattle that masks all other noise save for distant traffic winding toward highways out of town. He reads House Bill 1203 twice over under weak lamplight, a copy printed and highlighted in pink marker, lines drawn neatly through sections outlining parking rights for private vehicles in residential zones. The law seems clear enough. So long as it's legally parked and properly registered, there should be no cause for removal. But clarity feels fragile here among rules written by hands unseen and enforced by voices that rarely speak above whispers or warnings taped onto windshields during darkest hours before dawn. Sunday morning brings another silence, the kind that settles thick over concrete when storms have passed, but clouds refuse to break apart entirely. No new notices greet him this time, but neither do apologies nor explanations arrive from above or below. Only absence fills hallways brightened by fluorescent bulbs humming overhead. Neighbors pass without meeting eyes. A woman carrying groceries with keys clutched tight between knuckles. An older man shuffling bills inside an open mailbox before retreating behind locked doors painted white years ago by previous tenants whose names have faded from memory, but not from records kept somewhere just out of reach. Late at night, he writes another email, this one shorter than before. Subject line simple as breath held in darkness waiting for answer that may never come at all. Outside wind shakes palm fronds loose from branches worn thin by seasons spent bending, but never breaking, not yet anyway. Not while roots hold firm beneath soil packed hard by sun and rain alike. Each morning begins again with small rituals. Coffee brewed strong enough to mask bitterness left behind by sleepless hours, spent staring at ceiling marked by faint outlines, where water once ran unchecked from pipes above. Shoes laced tight before stepping out onto tile cold enough to remind him that nothing here is promised. Not safety nor peace, nor even quiet beyond what can be carved out between rounds of notice, served without warning, or reason given save for what something may look like to someone who holds power simply because they live one floor higher than anyone else around them does. That one sits heavy on my chest. Some truths never get spoken out loud, they just hover in the air, waiting for someone who will listen. 5 stories, 5 quiet shadows left behind. I feel changed, heavier maybe, but more awake to what people hide and carry with them. Thanks for sitting with me in the dark tonight. If you want more stories from the darkest corners of Reddit, subscribe and come back next time.